What if the person you love most walked down the aisle to erase you from their own history? Would you stay quiet, or would you have the courage to say what you feel? I'm Andre. Today I'm telling a simple but very true story. There's no difficult mystery. There's a pounding heart, painful choices, and a burning question. What do we do when life demands we hide to fit into other people's worlds? It all begins at a wedding reception. The hall gleams. The flowers are white. The music is sweet. People laugh and take pictures. In the center, Marcelo holds his wife's hand and smiles. To everyone, he seems like the perfect husband. To me, sitting at a table farther away, he's also the boy I knew at school, the boy who taught me to breathe guilt-free for a few minutes at a time. I look at him and see a shadow hidden behind his smile. Those who don't know him walk by without noticing. I do. It's the smile of someone trying to say, everything's okay, even when it's not. I get up from the table and walk to the porch to feel the breeze. I need air. The cold wind hits my face and brings back a summer long ago. The schoolyard was hot. Marcelo ran, laughed loudly, talked to everyone. I pretended not to look, but I did. One day, a notebook fell to the floor and our hands touched. It was brief, but I felt something important had begun. After that, we started meeting without planning. In the shelter from the rain, in the library, on the way home. We understood each other through looks. There was no room for grand gestures. There was care, silence, and an entire world hidden in minutes. We soon learned a hard rule. To avoid becoming a target, we had to appear invisible. At school, we both acted like distant friends. At home, we each followed the family's lead. Inside, our hearts craved space. At night, when we could, we found a way to be who we were. It wasn't much, but it was real. And that was what kept us going. Time passed. The pressure grew. People spoke without knowing, laughed, maliciously, made up stories. One day Marcelo arrived with a serious expression and told me that his family had chosen a betrothal for him. He said he was tired of the fear and that marriage seemed the only way out. I listened in silence. There was no way to argue with the weight of an entire house, plus the street, plus the church. My heart sank. Then I understood that our agreement of invisibility had become a prison. I return to the wedding balcony and think about all this. Inside, Marcelo poses for photos, receives hugs and thanks. He gently holds his wife's hand. I recognize this gesture. I know when he does something out of genuine affection, and I know when he does it out of obligation. I don't judge. I just feel. I've also hidden myself many times to escape the laughter of others. But hiding has a price. Each time we fade a little, and I don't want to fade anymore. He sees me on the balcony. He understands why I came. There was no fight. There was no scene. There was a silence that spoke. In his eyes I read a simple plea. Please don't let me forget who I am. In my gaze he found the answer. I'm still here, but I no longer live alone in the dark. I take a deep breath and remember my first courage. I remember the rain beating down on the roof, the quick hug, the fear that accompanied me but didn't control everything. I remember how good it felt to laugh without thinking about tomorrow. I remember how the world seemed whole when we were together, even if it was just for 5 minutes before the next corner. And then I look at the room and think that that beautiful party has a hidden secret. Not every photo tells the truth. You might be wondering why anyone would accept this life. I wondered too for a long time. The answer is stark. Many people don't truly choose. Many people just try to survive. When family and town point the finger, when religion turns to stone and doesn't welcome, when friends disappear, fear grows. And when fear grows, we believe hiding is the only way forward. But hiding doesn't heal. It only postpones the pain. I look out onto the dance floor and see Marcelo laugh without showing his teeth. It's a polite laugh. I recognize that laugh. I've used it a lot. It's the laugh we wear when we want to please others' expectations. It's tight. It leaves a mark. It hurts. No one sees it from the outside. Inside, it burns. Maybe you're experiencing something similar. Maybe you're keeping a secret to fit in where you think you need. 2. Maybe someone you love is also hiding behind a practiced smile. If this story has touched you, I ask for a simple gesture now. Leave your like so more people can see it. And if you can, comment with the word truth. It's a small word, but it's powerful. It helps those who come here understand that they are not alone. I return to the table and set my glass aside. I can't taste it. What I feel is an overwhelming desire not to repeat the same steps forever. I didn't come to this party to destroy anything. I came to remember who I am. I came to say that true love can't be extinguished with flowers, music, and pretty photos. It may even remain silent for a while, but one day it will ask for a voice. The story I'm going to tell from now on is made of clear memories and difficult choices. There's affection, there's fear, there's courage, there's stumbles, there's learning. There are no difficult words. It's just people trying to live in a way that makes sense. I don't promise a perfect ending. I promise sincerity. I promise you'll see yourself somewhere, even if it's very small. And if you see yourself, I'll have already achieved what I wanted. I don't know if you've ever been through a marriage that feels like a movie, and, at the same time, hides a sadness in the corner of the room. I did. I'm here now. I see it. And yet, I still believe that the truth, when it arrives, opens a window. The room may feel cold for a while, but air gets in, and you can breathe. If you want to walk this path with me, sign up now. It's quick and very helpful. That way you won't miss a single thing I'm about to share. And if this opening sparked something inside you, leave a like. It pushes this story to those who need to hear it. And remember the word truth in the comments. It's a simple hug for those who come later. I stood on the porch for another minute. The wind was cold, but it felt good. I knew I wasn't there by chance. I wanted to take a closer look at what I'd been trying to keep hidden for years. Marcelo saw me and came slowly over. I didn't need to hear any words. His face said it all. There was a cry for help hidden in his eyes. I understood. He also understood my silence. I still loved him, but I no longer wanted to live in hiding. I returned to the living room and watched the first dance. The lights spun, people clapped, the music embraced everyone. But to me, it felt like the song was coming from underwater. Slow, distant. I remembered the boy. From school, the heat of the gym, the notebook that fell to the floor, the first touch of hands. I remembered the rain that covered us like a secret roof. I remembered the fear that arrived early, and the agreement we made without speaking. To survive, we would be invisible. Being invisible seems simple. You pretend everything's fine. You laugh at the right moments. You learn to measure each gesture. You hide the hand you want to hold. You trade a hug for a wave. You put on a smile that doesn't show your teeth. On the outside, you pass by. On the inside, you disappear. And when you realize it, you no longer know where you've ended up. I looked at Marcelo on the dance floor and recognized the effort. He held on to life carefully so no one would notice the cracks. I knew them all. I'd been in every one. When the song ended, I left the room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry in front of anyone. I just left. Outside, the night was cool. I took a deep breath, like someone returning to the surface after a long time underwater. In the parking lot, a stray dog followed me for a few steps. He had watchful eyes and a gentle demeanor. I reached out. He sniffed, circled twice, and lay down near my feet. I stayed there, petting him. I thought he also had no tag or collar. Still, he chose to stay. In that small gesture, I understood something simple. Freedom isn't a shout. Freedom is being able to choose who's by your side without fear. I got home late. The house was dark. I sat on the couch and listened to the night noises. I remembered the times Marcelo and I almost got caught. I remembered the jokes that tear like knives. I remembered the letters tucked away in the back of the drawer. I remembered the day I'd panicked and burned 2 of them. I wanted to erase the evidence of what I felt. I regretted it the next moment. Paper turns to ash, but the feeling doesn't turn to nothing. It stays. It learns to wait. I went to my room and grabbed an old box. Inside were a yellowed note, a movie ticket, a shirt button, a strand of blue ribbon. Small things that hold worlds. I sat on the floor with the box on my lap. I didn't want to punish myself. I wanted to remember. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to remember without guilt. We loved each other the way we could. Amid fears and closed doors, we found a way. It may not have been pretty to the world, but it was real to us. I opened the window. The air hit my face. I grabbed a notebook and wrote a simple sentence. I exist. That was it. No frills, no secrets. I exist. I put the paper on the closet door, where my eyes reach it every day. I wasn't going to lose myself anymore. I went back to the living room and drank some water. I thought about the dance, the flowers, the photos. I thought about Laura, my wife. I didn't see her as an enemy. I saw her as someone who had also been swallowed up by a story she didn't fully understand. Often there are no villains or heroes. There are people trying not to suffer, and in the midst of this attempt, others suffer. It hurts, but it's true. I could have gotten angry. I could have sent harsh messages. I didn't. I chose silence and care. I chose to take care of myself. I chose to rest. And this rest had a new name: courage. Courage isn't shouting. Courage is staying whole inside when everything demands that you bend outside. The next morning, I walked to the bakery. The sun was beating down on the buildings, and the city looked freshly washed. I grabbed some bread, looked at the people, and saw children in line for juice. This simple world calmed me. Not every day has to be long. Sometimes what saves us is hot coffee and bread with butter. Sometimes what saves us is the routine that doesn't judge us. On the way back, I passed the square where Marcelo and I used to sit as children. The wooden bench was still there, a little crooked, a little worn. I rested my hand on the wood and felt a slight tremor, the kind your body sends when your memory is strong. I smiled to myself. It wasn't a sad smile. It was a smile of acceptance. I wouldn't forget, but I also wouldn't live trapped in what had passed. At home, I set the table for coffee and turned on my phone. There were messages from friends, work notices, ordinary things. Among them, an unknown number. The text was short. It asked if I was okay. I knew who it was. My chest tightened. I took a deep breath. I had no ready answers. I knew only one thing for sure. I no longer wanted to be a shadow of myself. As the coffee water boiled, I made a promise to myself. Everything I do from now on will go through a filter. This gesture either distances me from myself or brings me closer. If it distances me, I'll leave. If it brings me closer, I'll stay. I'll no longer beg for space in anyone's heart. I'll make space in mine. And whoever wants it, comes in. If you're with me this far, I want to ask you something simple. Leave your like now. It helps this story reach those in need. And if you feel like this narrative embraced a piece of you, subscribe. That way, you won't miss the next steps. In the comments, say one word to me: courage. I'll read each one. This word is a thread that connects my voice to yours. It's like holding hands without seeing each other. I closed the window, sat at the table, and picked up my phone again. I stared at the message for a while longer. The clock made a small noise, like a heartbeat slowly. I thought about everything. About school, the rain, on the porch, the dog in the night, the sentence on my locker. I exist. Then I took a breath and wrote a short reply. I didn't tell everything. I didn't promise anything. I just took the first step. Sometimes the first step is what opens the whole road. My phone vibrated again. Another message arrived. The future was knocking on my door with calm fingers. I didn't know if it would be easy. I only knew that this time I would walk, seeing my own face, not the, mask I'd been taught to wear. And even if obstacles came my way, I would follow. Because the path that truth opens may be narrow, but it leads far. The phone vibrated again. I read the message and recognized the look. It was him. His name wasn't there. But the heart knows what the eyes take time to accept. He asked if I was okay. I said yes and asked if he was too. It took me a few minutes to hit send. I took a deep breath. I wanted to respond like someone opening a door, not like someone running for cover. The answer came quickly. He said he wanted to talk to me. No fighting, no yelling, just talking. I stared at the screen like someone staring at a lake at night. I wanted to jump in, but the water was cold. Even so, I arranged a simple meeting. A cafe near the square, in the middle of the afternoon. A place of light, a place of people, a place where fear shrinks. On the way, my steps were light and heavy at the same time. Light because I wanted to see. Heavy because I knew seeing could hurt. The city went on as normal. Children were leaving school. A vendor was whistling. A lady was watering plants in the window. I thought, this is what life is made of. Simple things that continue, even when our chest feels like a messy room. I arrived first. I chose a table by the window. I ordered a glass of water. I touched the cold glass. I needed to stay awake inside. When he entered, the air changed. I can't explain it. Sometimes someone's presence is like a home you know with your eyes closed. He sat opposite. His voice was low. I didn't say much either. This wasn't the time to reminisce about every detail of the past. It was time to say what the present required. I told him I still felt it. Not with drama, with truth. I told him I no longer want to be anyone's shadow. I told him I can't go back to a place where I fade away so others can shine. He listened with his hands clasped. He said he'd thought about me all these years. He said he'd tried to bury me inside him. He said he couldn't. I understood every word, but I repeated it for both of us to hear. Love that exists needs air. Without air, love becomes fright. He asked if I still had room for us. I said my heart has room, but there's no hiding place. I spoke slowly, like someone laying bricks. I want to be able to walk down the street with my head held high. I want to be able to hold the hand of the one I love for as long as I want. I want to be able to tell a story without having to invent a character for myself. He lowered his eyes. I saw fear. I saw guilt. I saw a desire to stay. I saw a desire to run. He said his life is full of threads: family, work, church, expectations, looks. I said I understand, but I also said that every thread can tighten so much that it cuts the skin. And when it cuts, we have to choose. Either we loosen the knots, or we stop feeling. The conversation was long and simple. For a few minutes, we just breathed. Together. Silence can be a bridge when both are on the same side. In the end, he asked for time. I heard the word time and thought of everything that had already gone. Even so, I replied that his time cannot be the end of mine. I will not wait still in a dark room. I will follow, and if he wants to walk, I will watch. But I will not go back to the closet. This room no longer serves me. I left the cafe and walked to the square. I sat on the old bench. The sun was shining through the leaves. A boy was flying a kite with his father. The taut string cut through the air with a thin sound. I looked up at the sky and understood. A kite only flies because it has a string, but if the string becomes a noose around the neck, the kite won't fly. I don't want any more strings. I want strings that release. On the way home, I thought about Laura. She's not a wall for me to climb over. She's a person, and people feel. I won't wish her pain. I won't compete with her life. What exists between me and him isn't a race. It's a decision, and every decision has a price. I've decided to keep my respect for myself and for her. That, too, is love. Love for myself, love for others, love for what's right. At home, I opened the window and made coffee. The scent wafted up calmly. I grabbed my notebook and wrote 3 lines. I exist. I deserve to be seen. I can love without hiding. I read quietly, as if I were teaching my heart to speak a new language. I kept the notebook next to my bed. I want to wake up and remember that my life is not a closed box. The phone vibrated. It was him again. He said he enjoyed hearing from me. He said I was clear. He said he needed to think. I responded carefully. He said I also needed to take care of myself. He said I was open to a true path. No shortcuts, no excuses. He thanked me. I ended the conversation with a simple wish. May each of us choose what makes our soul breathe. That night, the entire city was inside. My room. Car lights passed slowly through the curtains. The clock made a small sound. I closed my eyes and returned to our old places. The school gate. The hallway smelling of paint. The rain that hid our kiss. I felt fondness for that time. Not anger. We did the best we knew how. Now we can do better. The next day I went to work. I greeted colleagues. I completed tasks. I drank water. Sometimes healing doesn't come in fireworks. Sometimes it arrives slowly, like someone pulling up a chair and sitting next to us. During my break, I opened my phone and read messages from people who wished me well. A friend sent a short message. He said he was rooting for me. I smiled. Support is like a breeze at our backs. We walk more firmly. In the afternoon, I returned to the square. I wanted to repeat a small gesture. I stood for a few minutes. I looked around. I took a breath. I walked to the bench and sat down. I took a piece of paper with one word on it from my pocket. Courage. I placed the paper between the pages of a book someone had left on the exchange shelf. Whoever opens it will find it. Whoever finds it might need it. I thought that courage multiplies when it passes from hand to hand. When it got dark, I decided to do something I'd put off for years. I held my own hand for a moment. It felt strange, but it made sense. I said to myself quietly, I'm with you. It may seem silly, but it changed my body from the inside out. We rely so little on each other. We wait so long for someone to come and save us that we forget that salvation also begins within. Before bed, I went back to the closet and read the phrase I'd taped to the door. I exist. I touched the paper with my fingertips. I thought of you, listening to me now, of everything you also hold inside, of everything you're dying to say but don't, of everything that weighs you down when you want to fly. I want to ask you something in the middle of this story. Leave a like now if this resonated with you. It pushes this message to more people who need a push of light. And subscribe. That way you'll walk with me and not miss what comes next. Write a simple word in the comments. Courage. I promise to read and save it. I ended the night looking out the window. The street was quiet. My cell phone was silent. So was I. I lay down and closed my eyes with a clear thought. From now on, my every step will be carefully chosen. I will not hide behind pretty phrases. I will speak my truth, with respect, with firmness, with love for myself. The next day I woke up early. The sky was clear. I made coffee, ate bread, and spread butter on it like someone who spreads hope in the day. My phone vibrated again. A message. It wasn't from him. It was from someone I hadn't expected. The person wrote only a few words. We need to talk. The name at the top of the screen made me stop in the middle of the kitchen. The air grew heavier. I closed my eyes for a second. I knew that conversation could change.
Everything. For me, for him, for whoever was beside him. It was a short message with 2 words that stopped my day. We need to talk. The name at the top of the screen made me take a deep breath. I knew that conversation could change a lot.
I closed my eyes for a moment and braced myself. I stared at my phone screen like someone staring at a closed door. 2 words, simple and powerful. We need to talk. The name up there stopped me cold. I felt my chest tighten, as if I'd returned to being the
boy who hid his heart in his backpack pocket. I chose a simple spot, a square with wooden benches and mature trees. I arrived first. I sat down, counted the steps to the trash can, listened to the sound of pigeons, tried to breathe slowly. My fingers trembled. I didn't know if I was going to hear forgiveness, goodbye, or something that could change my entire life. Then he came. He walked toward me with short steps, without looking to the sides, like someone afraid of being seen by someone they knew. It was the same smile from years ago, only tired, and they were the same eyes that once taught me what love was. Marcelo sat apart, as if the space between us were a fence. We sat in silence for a while. The wind rustled the leaves. A child kicked a ball near the bandstand. I counted to 20 until he spoke. Andre, I was wrong. I tried to erase everything. I forced myself to be someone else. But the truth came back. The words came out softly, almost like a whisper. I wanted to say 1,000 things, but the words wouldn't come. I could only think about the wedding, the photos, the music. He stared at the ground, as if searching for words among the stones. I thought getting married would save me, that my father would respect me, that the church would embrace me. It didn't happen. I became a smiling doll, and inside I cried. The entire square seemed to shrink, as if it were just the 2 of us. I asked if he was okay. He laughed awkwardly. I'm not. I wake up and feel short of breath. I see the breakfast table and think of our old school desk. I hear the street noise and remember the rain from our first kiss. I looked at his hands. They were firm and weak at the same time. They seemed to beg for help and apologize. I pressed my fingertips against the bench to avoid holding his hand. What do you want from me? I asked. He took a deep breath. I want the truth, even if it hurts. I want to stop running away. I want to talk to Laura. I want to face my father. I want to face the church. I want to face myself, but I don't know where to begin. Laura's name slammed into my chest. I never meant to hurt anyone. I said this, looking him in the eye, and he nodded with sweet weariness. I know. That's why I came. You've always been the honest part of me. We remained silent. A dog ran and stopped in front of our leg. I stroked its fur. The owner apologized. It was a simple moment. I needed to think calmly. I told him that if he truly wanted to change, the change would have rules. Nothing hidden, nothing half-hearted, no promises and then backtracking. He agreed immediately, almost like someone receiving water after crossing a desert. I told him about the weight I'd carried since the wedding, the lump in my throat, the fear of becoming a shadow. I was there to live, or to leave. He listened to me like someone drinking water. Each sentence seemed to open a space within him. When I finished, Marcelo straightened his body and said softly, I don't want to lose you again. The phrase kept going around in my head. I'm not a boy anymore. I won't live on what's unsustainable. He nodded and said he'd talk to Laura that night. I remained silent, fear and hope warring inside me. Before leaving, he asked us to take a walk. We walked slowly, side by side, without touching. We passed the old-school gate, still there, closed. I stopped. I touched the cold fence. I remembered the note crumpled in a book. I remembered the day we were almost caught, behind the field. Marcelo looked at the same fence and said, "If I could go back, I would have held your hand right there, in the light, in front of everyone." I didn't answer. I just stared at the rust marks, as if they were the years that had passed. Then we continued on. At the end of the street was a small cafe with a creaky door. We went in. The smell of bread and fresh coffee filled my chest. We sat in a corner. The woman brought 2 cups. I stirred the sugar slowly. He, with his firm voice this time, spoke of the plan. "Today I'll talk to her. Tomorrow I'll talk to my dad. I don't want to put it off any longer. If I have to lose everything, at least I'll lose it being me." I asked him if he was afraid. He said yes. Very much so. I was too. But fear can't rule everything. We left the cafe as the sky turned heavy and rain fell. We ran to the marquee. He laughed. And it was the same laugh as years ago. I felt an old warmth ignite in my chest. It wasn't just desire. It was home. It was returning to a place that had always been mine. He called the car and before getting in, held my gaze for a second longer. It felt like a silent request. "Wait for me." I didn't promise with my mouth. I promised with my eyes. He went. I stayed. The rest of the day was a trail of thoughts. I went home and lay on the couch. I remembered my father. I remembered the fear. I remembered what I said. Truth or nothing. Night fell slowly. My phone went silent. I went to cook. I chopped tomatoes, onions, and garlic. The pan hissed. The smell of the kitchen calmed me. I sat down to eat, and with the first bite, my phone vibrated. I nearly dropped my plate. It was a message. I talked. That's all. One word that opened a world. I replied, "And how was it?" Time took a while to pass. He wrote in parts. Laura and I. I told him everything. She listened. We cried. I asked for forgiveness. She said she deserves her own truth. I said I do too. It was hard, Andre, but it was clear. I took a breath. It wasn't the end of the world. It was a rough start. He said he was going to sleep away, that he was going to stay at his parents' house for a while and tell me the rest the next day. My stomach turned when I read the word parents. I knew how this conversation could end. I didn't sleep. I kept my eyes open, replaying the scenes of our day. I wanted to call, but held back. As dawn began to break, I went out for a walk. The street was empty. The trees dripped with the last of the rain. I thought about how we spend our lives waiting for a moment that arrives without warning and changes everything. I thought about how expensive it is to remain hidden. I thought about how expensive it is to open the door. Everything has a price, but I no longer wanted to pay with my soul. Halfway down the block, I remembered a small box in my closet. Inside was a photo of us, 2 boys laughing crookedly. I decided that if all went well, I would show him this photo. I returned home as the sky turned clear blue. I made coffee. I sat down. The phone vibrated again. I closed my eyes before looking. I didn't know if the news was good or bad. I only knew that from that message onward, the path would open in a way we had never attempted. I touched the screen. I tapped the screen. The text opened like a cold breath on my face. The message said, "I spoke to Laura. She cried. I cried. I asked for forgiveness. She said she also wants her own truth. Today I'm going to my parents' house. I'm scared. I read it twice. His fear pierced me. I wrote back, "Do you want me to come with you?" He replied, "Not yet. I need to try alone. If I can't do it, I'll call you." I stood in the middle of the kitchen, cup in hand. The coffee had gone cold. The silence of the house seemed to hear me thinking. I grabbed my jacket, walked across the living room, sat down, stood up, and sat down again. Anyone who's ever waited for news knows how time turns to rubber. It stretches and stretches but never ends. Dusk fell and the light from the window turned golden. My cell phone vibrated. My heart raced. It was him. I answered on the first ring. The voice came low, hoarse. I went. I told them everything. My father turned red. He said he didn't recognize me. My mother cried without looking at me. My brother stood at the door, like a guard. I said I wasn't going to hide anymore. They asked me to leave. "I have a backpack. I can go to your house." I said, "Come." Right away. I hung up and tidied the couch. I put a clean towel in the bathroom. I turned on the kettle. I wanted to give him a place to rest. Not the world, just a place. When the doorbell rang, I was already at the door. He entered slowly, his eyes puffy. He set his backpack on the floor as if releasing a weight he'd carried for years. We looked at each other. We didn't hug right away. Sometimes the hug comes before the words. Sometimes it's the other way around. That day, the words came first. I said, "You're safe here." He nodded. I sat with him on the sofa. The steam from the tea made a small pattern in the air. He took a deep breath, as if learning to breathe again. He told it slowly. His father spoke loudly. His mother cried softly. His brother stood firm. There was no slap. There were phrases that hurt more than a hand. He repeated one of them in a dry voice. "You killed our family." Then he fell silent, as if he still hears the phrase in his heart. I said, "You didn't kill anyone, you just turned on the light. Sometimes the light scares you, but it shows you where to step." He stared at his hands for a moment. Then he looked up and asked, "What now?" I answered calmly, "Now we make a plan. Step by step. No rushing, no hiding. 3 things. First, respect for Laura. A dignified divorce, without hurting her anymore. Second, a place of your own. A simple place, but your own. Third, a support network. People to listen to you when I'm not around. A group, a friend, a therapist." He listened to each item like someone putting together pieces of a puzzle. We went to the kitchen. I cooked something simple. Rice, egg, tomato. He cut the bread. The table looked beautiful unintentionally. We ate in a beautiful silence that brings rest. When we finished, he picked up his cell phone. He wrote to Laura, "Thank you for listening to me. I'll respect your wishes. I'll leave the house early tomorrow. Let's talk calmly about everything." She didn't answer much, but she did. I read a small relief in his eyes. Small reliefs can also save lives. Before falling asleep, he looked at me as if asking permission to fall asleep. I said goodnight. He lay down on the couch and passed out. I stared at the dark room for a while. I thought about the boys we were. I thought about the price of living in hiding. I thought about the price of telling the truth. Both are high, but one of them gives you a future. The other only brings you exhaustion. In the morning, we took our backpacks to a left luggage office. We walked past rental ads. We entered simple studio apartments. One smelled of paint. Another had a large window. In one, the sun streamed in like a hug. Marcelo smiled for the first time in days. I knew right then, this was it. During our break from visiting, we stopped at a bakery. A man at the next table looked us up and down. I felt the old urge to shrink. Marcelo extended his hand across the table, not to attract attention, to beckon me closer. I held it. Simple. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, and then I let go. Not out of fear of the man, out of respect for our pace. Truth has its pace too. It's not always a race. Sometimes it's a walk. Later, we stopped by his house to pick up documents and 2 shirts. The gate was ajar. His brother opened the cold door. He said the things would be in a black bag, like trash. I took a deep breath to avoid answering. Marcelo got in alone. I stayed in the car, hands on the steering wheel, eyes on the sidewalk. The second-story window moved. A curtain. Behind it, his mother. For a second, I thought she was going to disappear. But the front door opened, and she came down. She carried a package wrapped in cloth, a blanket, bread, apples, mother's things. She didn't speak. She handed it to him at the gate, without crossing the line. He took it. Their eyes met for 2 seconds. Then, silence. She went upstairs. He came back. On the way back, he cried softly, without hiding it. I drove peacefully. There's nothing wrong with crying when life changes. Arriving at my building, he dried his face, took the package, and smiled briefly. I said, "Today, we celebrate with soup and calm music." He replied, "Today I just want to hear the sound of your house." Last night I wrote a sentence in my notebook. I want to remind you, brave isn't someone who doesn't feel fear. It's someone who carries fear in their pocket and still carries on. If you're listening to me this far, and feel this fear in your own story, make a simple gesture right now. Like this video and write courage in the comments. These 2 small things will help this story reach more people who need to hear that they're not alone. And subscribe. Staying close makes a difference. In the following days, life began to settle down. The contract for the small apartment was finalized. We bought pillows, sheets, and a single pot. He chose a plant for the window. I told him that plants teach people to stay. He laughed. We went to the market like we were building a nest. At the checkout, the woman asked if we were moving. Marcelo said it was just the beginning. I smiled to myself. Marcelo scheduled a meeting with a lawyer recommended by a friend of Laura's. When he returned, he told me it would be a calm process. No blame, no fighting. Tough, but fair. He also sought out a group of men who accepted themselves late in life. He returned from the first meeting with different perspectives. Less shame, more grounded. He said he heard stories that felt like mirrors. He said that, for the first time, he didn't feel like a strange creature. I thought, this is how we breathe. With people. One Sunday afternoon, we decided to return to the square where we first met. Not to reopen wounds. To honor the journey. We sat on the same bench. The wind was different. And so were we. He took a folded piece of paper from his pocket. I wrote something for myself, he said. He read it softly. I forgive myself for taking so long. I embrace myself. I promise myself truth. I listened and remained silent. Some promises need silence to take hold. It was then that his phone vibrated. A familiar number. His father. His chest sank. He answered. On the other end, the voice was rigid. Come here tomorrow. We need to talk. He hung up and went white. I grabbed his shoulder. We're not going alone, I said. You can go if you want, but don't go without a plan, or without someone waiting for you on the corner. That night he said little. I made tea. I played some calming music. We put away the cutlery together. We looked out the window. Every light in the apartment seemed like a story. In one of them, I thought, someone else was fighting the same invisible battle. Before bed, I grabbed the little box from my closet. I showed him the picture of the two boys grinning crookedly. He touched his finger to the edge of the paper. He said a simple sentence. I'll come back for that smile. Not the fake one. The real one. Dawn arrived quickly. The street smelled of fresh bread. My meeting with my father was soon. I made coffee and prayed my way. Not a long prayer. A short request. Light where there is darkness. Truth without hurt. A whole heart. He put on his blue shirt, took a deep breath and looked at me. If I don't write to you within the hour, you'll call me, he said. I said, okay. He went downstairs. I stayed by the window. I watched him turn the corner and disappear. The cell phone sat on the table, silent as stone. The clock began to tick too slowly. I sat down, stood up, walked, came back. 1 minute, 5, 9, 15, 22. I stared at the clock like someone waiting for the sun to rise. 1 minute, 5, 9. The silence of the house breathed with me. I walked from the window to the table, from the table to the door and back again. A meeting with your father is not something to be interrupted. It's a narrow bridge. Those in the middle must follow it to the end. You've ever waited for a message that could change everything? Write in the comments. I waited. It helps me know you're with me. At minute 28, my phone vibrated. Just one sentence. I'm with him. We'll talk in the living room. I'll write to you later. I read slowly, like someone testing water to see if it's sweet or salty. I sat down. I stood up. I wanted to go to his street and stand on the corner, just to be close. I decided to wait. The clock became an enemy. My heart became a drum. At minute 42, another message. This time he's speaking loudly. I told him I'm not going back into the closet. My mom asks for calm. My brother is tense. I took a deep breath, put on my jacket, and left. I knew I wasn't going in. I was just going to stand where he could see me if he needed to. Sometimes love is presence in the shadows. If this resonates with you, comment presence in the shadows. Your message helps this video reach more people. The family's street had a gate leaning against it and a light curtain on the second floor. The wind stirred the corner of the fabric as if the house were breathing. I stopped on the other side, near the streetlight. To anyone looking, I was just someone waiting for a ride. Inside, I was a map of narrow streets. The door opened. Marcelo appeared, his father following behind. His father spoke with his entire body, hands, chin, shoulders. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see their weight. Marcelo kept his head high. He didn't lower his gaze. This gave me strength. His mother appeared in the background with a cloth in her hand. His brother stood motionless in the doorway, rigid as a wall. His father pointed to the street. Marcelo took 3 steps. When he saw me, he stopped for a moment. I didn't move a muscle. I just let him know. I'm here. He came to me, breathing shallowly. He leaned against the lamppost. We learn the timing of our touch when we've lived in hiding for too long. He said his father demanded silence. He said if he spoke of our love, he'd be out for good. I asked if he wanted to try another conversation. He said yes, but not today. Today his heart was tired. We walked to the square and sat on the bench in the shade. He calmly recounted the scene. He said he came in and spoke clearly. I'm a gay man. I love him, and I won't hide it. He said his father called it a phase, then a choice, then a sin. He said his mother cried without looking at him. He said his brother stood at the door as a lookout. When he finished, he was quiet. So was I. The wind stirred the leaves. A boy ran past with a blue kite. I thought of the kite that soars even when tied to the string. Sometimes it's the string that helps it soar. It depends on who's holding the line. The cell phone rang. It was from the house. He answered. His mother's voice was thin and distant. Eat something. Bring a coat. Forgive me for not knowing how to speak. She didn't say my name, but she said son twice. When she hung up, Marcelo cried with relief. It's not enough, he said. I replied that a little is also bread, and bread sustains. If this scene touched you, comment son. It's a simple word, but it carries so much. We returned to my building. On the way, he talked about fear. Fear of not being seen as a man. Fear of losing his family. Fear of the street. I said that fear doesn't disappear. Fear learns to walk beside us without pushing us. What pulls us along is courage. If you've ever walked in fear and still carried on, write courage in the comments. And if this video has embraced you in some way, leave a like now. This strengthens the channel and opens the way for those who need to hear it. At home, I made soup. I put 2 slices of bread in the bowl. He stood at the counter watching the stove flame as if gazing at the sea. He talked about Laura. He said she was worthy. He said he wants her to be happy. He'll sign everything without a fight. I listened attentively. Respect is a bridge. Without a bridge, each side becomes an island. After dinner, we opened the computer and wrote a letter. A simple title, What I Need You to Know. He spoke of the boy he was, of the prayers he said to change, of the nights he wished he woke up different to fit in the portrait. He spoke of the joy of recognizing himself. He spoke of our love with clear words. Near the end, he wrote, I don't want to defeat anyone. I just don't want to lose myself again. When he finished, he stared at the screen. The letter was his, but it seemed to be the voice of many. If you feel this letter also speaks for you, comment truthfully. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now. That way, you'll walk with us and never miss the next one. The next day, we went to sign the apartment contract. The owner was a soft-spoken gentleman. He explained the key, the faucet, and the light, as if delivering a beginning, not just an address. Marcelo held the pen carefully. At the end, the man wished for home. That word filled the room. Home isn't just walls. Home is permission to be. If you hope each person finds their place in the world, say home. The move fit into 2 suitcases and a box of books. I took the window plant. We opened the windows to let in the light. Light always asks for an invitation. He put the blanket his mother sent on the bed. I left the plant in the sun. We went to the bakery. The baker asked if it was a grand opening. Marcelo said yes. A grand opening. I smiled. Simple people understand. Big words. In the afternoon, we went to the support group. Men of different ages. Similar stories. They spoke quietly and with pauses. No one tried to solve anyone's problems. Just listening was enough to make amends. Marcelo said he was afraid of loneliness. A white-haired man replied that loneliness improves when we stop hiding from ourselves. I kept that quote in my memory. Coming back, we stopped at a red light. A car next to us rolled down its window. 2 young men laughed and made a nasty gesture. The old knot in my stomach returned. I looked ahead and counted to 5. The light changed. I continued. Marcelo touched my arm and said that one day it would be less powerful. If you want a world of respect, write respect. Your word pushes the algorithm and opens the door for those who need shelter. At home, we opened a simple wine. Not for victory, but for progress. A calming song played. He rested his head on my shoulder. I thought about the beginning and the present. I thought about what's yet to come. The pain isn't over. The difficult conversations aren't over. But fear no longer rules. I said that. He said that, for the first time, he believes he can stay. If you're here with me so far, comment, I'm here, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. It's free, and it helps a lot. We arranged to have coffee with his mother in a neutral location. Marcelo said he'd bring the letter. I said I'd bring the ears. Before bed, I placed a glass of water next to his bed. He laughed and said I'd take care of the details. I replied that life taught me. He turned off the light. In the darkness, he spoke softly. Today I was scared, but I wasn't alone. I said this changes everything. At dawn, a light rain fell on the roof like light footsteps. I went back to sleep with the image of a path that, finally, is made in pairs. At dawn, the smell of coffee wafted from the kitchen. Marcelo was already standing, in a simple shirt, with the letter beside his cup. He smiled. I smiled back. We had another encounter, this time not with shouts but with careful words. Hope doesn't shout. Hope insists. I woke up with my heart racing and washed my face twice, as if summoning courage. It was time to sit down with Marcelo's mother. The letter was folded in 4, clean and simple. I read it again and felt the power of his words. It wasn't a shout. It was true. I grabbed 2 bottles of water, put them in my backpack, and we left. On the way, our hands brushed. It wasn't planned. It was necessity. If you've ever needed courage early in the morning, comment courage. Your comment helps this story reach those who need it. We chose a bright cafe with a large window. The mother arrived slowly, carrying a small bag and a scarf over her shoulder. I introduced myself quietly and promised respect. She took a deep breath and asked Marcelo to read the letter to her. He did. His voice trembled through the first few lines, then found its rhythm. When he finished, the silence sat with us. I could almost touch that silence with my fingertips. She wiped her hand across her eyes and spoke without raising her voice. She said she loved her son, that she couldn't unlearn some fears, that she was ashamed of having remained silent for so long. She said her father was hard as stone, but that stone can also be worn away with water. She asked for patience. She asked for care. And most importantly, she called Marcelo's son 3 times. I felt my chest tighten. If this word touches you, say son. It's a small word that holds so much. She pulled a package containing a simple cake from her bag. She said she didn't know how to start over, so she brought cake. I understood. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come in a pretty phrase. It comes in a piece of cake divided into 3. We cut it right there, on the coffee plate. I laughed because crumbs stuck to Marcelo's chin and his mother wiped them away with a napkin, just like when he was a child. She smiled. So did I. They were millimeters of peace, but they were ours. In the end, she asked for time. She said she still didn't know how to talk to her husband, said she needed to think and pray in her own way. I agreed. Time is also a gesture of love when the road is long. We left the cafe in a pleasant silence. The air felt lighter. I thought about what this moment could do in other homes. If you believe that small bridges change destinies, comment bridge. And if this video has already touched you, leave a like now. This gives strength to this story to continue and reach more people. We returned to our apartment and opened all the windows. I placed the plant in the sun, and he kept the letter in a red folder. We decided to paint a wall. We went from roll to roll, carefully, like someone who loves a house. The color chosen was light, almost morning. I wrote a word with paper tape before the paint dried. Home. Then I removed the tape, and the word was drawn. Clean. If you want a world where everyone finds their home, comment home. That night we went to the support group. There was a man with a low voice who said it took him 20 years to tell his family how he felt. He didn't mention names or dates. He talked about the smell of coffee, the empty chair, the fear of Sunday. He said he learned to talk about himself without asking for forgiveness. I wrote that phrase down on my phone, talking without asking for forgiveness. Marcelo grabbed my arm, and I realized the phrase had stuck with him too. If this idea resonated with you, write in the comments. I don't ask for forgiveness for being me. The next day, the mail brought an envelope with no return address and a heavy, judgmental pamphlet. My stomach sank. Marcelo took a deep breath and said the paper wouldn't fit. We tore it up at the door and threw it away. It wasn't anger. It was heartfelt hygiene. Then we went down to the market. The smell of oranges, pastries, and new coffee. A boy ran with a balloon and almost tripped over our foot. His father laughed, apologized, and walked on. This simple gesture reminded me that the world isn't all rock. There are many people whose ground is soft. In a corner of the market, the owner of the neighborhood haberdashery recognized us. She said she'd seen the move and asked if we needed nails, thread, or a basket. I said we needed good ideas. She pointed to a shelf and showed me a message board with wooden clothespins. I took it. At home, we hung cards with words we wanted to live by. Every day. Respect, calm, bread, sleep, hugs. If you have a word you'd like to hang on your wall, write it here. I want to read each one. An unexpected invitation arrived in the afternoon. A former colleague of Marcelo's had a project-based position. No jokes, no dirty looks. He said he'd accept if there was respect. The colleague responded by saying he only wanted good, honest people. Marcelo smiled. I saw relief in the corners of his eyes. On the first day, he returned tired and happy. He said he'd tried to get some bad things out, but they didn't stick. They said it once, got a no, and that was it. It was beautiful to see Marcelo stand up for himself without shouting. He was firm and clear. If you've already set a limit and it's been good for you, talk about it. Night fell and the doorbell rang. It was our third-floor neighbor, Mrs. Nair, with a loaf of bread and a small pot of basil. She said she likes to welcome guests with food and plants because one nourishes the body and the other the scent of the house. I thanked her and she added that people who care for others are the ones who matter. She didn't ask for anything beyond our name and apartment number. That simplicity resonated with me. On Saturday, we planned to watch a movie at home with popcorn. Half the bucket spilled onto the couch and we laughed like teenagers. I paused halfway through because a message arrived on Marcelo's phone. It was his mother. She said she'd prepared lunch for Sunday, that she wanted to see us, that his father would be out visiting a friend. There was no end to the fear. There was an invitation. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, like someone diving. I told him we'd go, without rushing, without an audience, just to eat and listen. On Sunday, the table was filled with fluffy rice, thick beans, a simple salad, and roast chicken. A family affair. The mother sat at the head of the table and started talking about recipes, the oven, and seasonings. I understood and joined, and I mentioned golden garlic and perfectly cooked onions. The kitchen chat gave way to a deeper conversation. She said she didn't know if she could defend her son to his father, but that she could feed him every day. I told her that love can also be served on a plate. She smiled, sad and happy at the same time. On the way out, a gesture I hadn't expected occurred. She placed an old key to the side gate in Marcelo's hand and told him he could enter that way whenever he needed, even if the classroom was difficult. The word difficult hung in the air, but the key felt heavy in the palm of her hand like an open door. It was there, on the sidewalk, that I understood that life moves in smaller steps than we'd like, and that's how it arrives. If this key also moved you, comment on key. Your comment tells me you're living every scene with me. We returned home and left the key on the sideboard. It looked like a small metal star. I made coffee and we opened the message board. I added a new word in large letters. Beginning. Marcelo rested his forehead against mine and remained there. Quiet. The silence this time smelled of warm bread. It was already night when the phone rang again. I saw the mother's name on the display. I answered and heard her trembling voice. She said her father had been taken ill late in the afternoon, that he had been taken to the hospital, and that he was conscious but angry, angrier than usual. She said she didn't know whether to call Marcelo or his brother, that she was afraid of the encounter but more afraid of not calling her own son. She asked us to come over. I thanked her for calling and said we were leaving. As we put on our jackets, our hearts raced like the first chapter of this new life. A hospital is a place for the body, but also for words that need to be born. In the elevator, I held Marcelo's hand. He squeezed tightly. I told him I would walk beside him, without a word, more or less. He nodded and breathed slowly. We got in. The car in the city seemed to hold its breath. The traffic lights changed quickly. The sidewalks were empty. The sky was rainless. I sat up straight, like someone holding the steering wheel of destiny for a few minutes. The radio was silent. My head was full. I thought about what happens when the time to say who we are again arrives in a white room, surrounded by machines and noises. I thought about my mother's key. I thought about the word beginning on our clothesline. If you've stuck with me this far, please like and subscribe. This will really help this story live on. And tell me in the comments what words you'd use in a difficult hospital conversation. I want to read them and take them home with me. The hospital hallway smelled of alcohol and stale coffee. The light was too white. The floor gleamed and every step made a sound. Marcelo and I walked slowly, hand in hand. When we reached the door to his room, his mother was waiting with tired eyes and a light coat draped over her shoulders. She came closer to us, lowered her voice and said he was awake but angry as always. Even angry, he was fragile. I held her hand for a second and promised respect. If you've ever walked into a hospital with a heavy heart, you speak of courage. Your words show me I'm not alone. We went inside. Marcelo's father was lying down, his skin pale and his lips dry. The monitor's noise was beeping, soft and stubborn. He turned his head when he saw us. First he looked at his mother, then at Marcelo. Finally he saw me and frowned like someone biting a stone. He didn't say hello. He didn't need to. His silence was loud. I stood by the window, unobtrusive, ready to leave if necessary. The nurse came in with a glass of water and asked who the next of kin was. The mother pointed to Marcelo. The father grumbled, as if to say he disagreed, but his body gave in. The nurse explained the schedule, the medication, the tests, and left. The four of us were left. The air felt heavy. I counted the tiles with my eyes just to breathe. Marcelo took a step and said, "Dad." It was that simple. One word. His father didn't answer. He moved his shoulder, as if pushing him away. Marcelo insisted. He spoke calmly. He said he'd come because he was his son. He said he wouldn't argue, that he was there to help, that his mother needed him. I saw his father's hand tremble slightly, and I heard a harsh question, the one he always threw like a stone. "Why did you do this to our family?" Marcelo took a breath, like someone holding back a wave, and answered without shouting, "Dad, I didn't do this against you. I did it for myself. I tried to be what you wanted, but I was dying inside." The mother sat on the edge of the bed, smoothed the sheets, and said her husband's full name, the way only she could. I understood it was a plea for calm. She looked at me and asked me to close the window a bit. I did. The room became warmer and less harsh. If you've ever had to close a window to start a conversation, comment on the window. Your comment helps this story reach more people. The father looked up at the ceiling and said he didn't know how to talk about it. He said he'd learned something different his whole life. He said he didn't know how to look at his son and see the same boy who kicked a ball around in the yard. I meant that boy was still there, just bigger and more honest. I didn't say anything. Marcelo spoke for me. "Dad, I'm still the same when I help you get up, when I take you to the clinic, when I pay for your medicine, when I call you on Sundays. I haven't stopped being your son. I've just stopped being a ghost." The father turned his face away again, but this time he was less harsh. He asked for water. His hand was shaking. Marcelo held the glass with both hands and patiently touched it to his lip. He took 3 sips and coughed a little. I went to get some paper. When I handed him the paper, the father accidentally touched my hand. It was a small touch, but it was a start. If small gestures touch you, write "I begin" in the comments. I read them all. Mom excused herself, saying she was going to speak to the nurse. I stood near the door, and Marcelo stood beside the bed, the two of them alone. Dad called his name softly. Marcelo leaned in. Dad said he didn't know how to forgive, that the word stuck. Marcelo replied that he wasn't there to extract forgiveness, he was there to stay, that sometimes staying is what saves. Dad closed his eyes and a tear fell. There weren't many, it was just one, but it was his, and a tear can say more than a speech. The nurse came back to do a simple exam. She asked one of us to stay, and the other to leave. I went out with Mom to the hallway. She showed me a bag of fruit in her purse. She said she brought chopped apples just the way her husband likes them. She said she no longer knew what was right or wrong, but she knew how to cook and wait. I told her that this, too, is love. She nodded. We sat side by side, without cell phones, without noise. We could only hear the footsteps of other runners who also carried stories. When we returned, my father's expression was less harsh. He asked me to dim the lights a bit. Marcelo adjusted the lamp and adjusted the pillow. My father looked at me and asked what I did. I told him I worked with letters and people. I explained simply. I said I liked to listen. He nodded. He said I seemed to talk little and listen a lot. Laughed lightly. I said yes. He replied that maybe it would be good to have someone like that around. It wasn't a hug. It was a sentence paving the way. If you believe that listening changes destinies, say, listen. Time in the hospital moves differently. 5 minutes become half an hour. We learn to appreciate the little things. The well-supported cup, the unwrinkled sheet, the watch that doesn't rush. Mom put the apple in a plastic container and offered it to him. Dad chewed slowly. He looked at Marcelo and said something I didn't expect. He said thank you. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. I held my breath for a second. Marcelo blinked hard to hold back tears. I saw the boy from the yard and the man in the letter in the same face. The father then asked about Laura. Marcelo spoke respectfully. He said the marriage was over. He said he wished her peace. He said he wouldn't speak ill of her. The father complained softly, saying marriage is forever, but his voice lost strength. Perhaps because the hospital bed reminds us of what's truly important. Marcelo said he learned to tell the truth without hurting. The father remained quiet, neither agreeing nor arguing. Sometimes that's the way to go. Neither yes nor no, just a pause. Night arrived through the window with a purple sky. The nurse said the visits were over. Mom packed up her things. Marcelo approached the bed to say goodbye, and his father raised his hand, barely, as if weighing a stone. Marcelo understood and took his hand. Dad squeezed. It wasn't strong. It was honest. He said, "See you tomorrow, son." The word son crossed the room like a thread of light. Mom closed her eyes for a second, as if offering silent thanks. I remained quiet, feeling the air change. We left the hospital slowly. The street was cold and windy, and there was a sugarcane juice vendor on the corner. The sweet smell wafted up, and I laughed in surprise. We bought 2 glasses and shared them with my mother, who barely drank but enjoyed. The sip. On the sidewalk bench, Marcelo held my hand and said he felt tired and light at the same time. I told him this was the weight lifting little by little, not all at once, little by little. We returned home and opened the door with our usual key. The other key, the one for my mother's side gate, was left on the sideboard. I leaned my forehead against the wall and gave thanks in my mind for every little yes the day had brought. I went to the message board and wrote a new word, present. I wanted to remind you that being present is an action, not just a presence. If this resonated, comment present, and leave your like now. Your small gesture gives me the energy to keep telling you. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so. That way you won't miss the next steps of this journey. Before bed, I texted Marcelo's mom. I wrote, "Thank you for Sunday lunch. Thank you for the apple. Thank you for the key." She replied with just one sentence, "We're trying." I stared at those 2 words like someone staring at a seed in the ground. There's rain, there's sun, there's time, but there's life. I lay down next to Marcelo. The room grew dark and silent. I heard his breathing slow. I thought of his father saying, "Son." I thought of his mother holding her purse like a boat. I thought of the nurse with her simple care. I thought of so many people who might be watching right now and need that same ray of light. If this light touched you, write light in the comments. Your word is companionship. The next day I woke up before my alarm. My body still felt heavy, but my heart felt light. The first thing I saw was the word I'd written on the message board, present. I remembered Marcelo's father's handshake and took a deep breath like someone guarding a simple treasure. I texted his mother saying we'd stop by the hospital with fruit and a small radio, because he always loved listening to the game. If this idea gave you a glimmer of hope, comment hope. Your message helps this video reach more people. We arrived at the hospital with firm steps. In the hallway, the nurse smiled and said the night had been peaceful. Inside the room, Dad's face was less grim. I told him we'd brought a radio and that I could tune it to his favorite station. He made a curt gesture like he'd said whatever, but I didn't give up. I turned the knob slowly, found a sports broadcast, and turned it down. Mom sat in the chair, tucked the blanket around her husband's legs, and Marcelo stayed by, the pillow, attentive to his every need. The scene was simple, and yet it felt like the beginning of a new home. I spent the morning telling sweet, short stories. I talked about Marcelo's childhood backyard, his mother's cornmeal cake, the dog that chased the ball. I said the boy from the backyard still lived inside the man in the bed. His father listened without commenting. Sometimes he frowned as if remembering. Sometimes he closed his eyes as if briefly returning to the sound of cleats on the floor. If fond memories help you, mention the memory. During lunch break, I went downstairs to get coffee. The cafeteria lady called me aside and said she'd heard our story in the hallway. She said she had a brother who'd been through something similar and hadn't spoken to his father for years. She said their reunion was just in time and that she was rooting for us. I thanked her and bought an extra cheese bread for Marcelo's mom. Small acts of support like this are like water in the desert. If you've ever been that support, leave your support in the comments. With each visit, the room changed a little. On the first day, only silence. On the second, a word. On the third, a request for water. On the fourth, a thank you. On the 5th, the father called Marcelo his son again. I counted his achievements in the same notebook where I write down bills, passwords, and lists. There I wrote words I don't want to forget: patience, presence, respect. If any of these speak to you, choose one and comment now. I read them all. One afternoon, the mother asked me to be alone with the father for a few minutes. She and Marcelo went downstairs to sort out the discharge paperwork. The room was filled with the noise of the radio and the smell of alcohol. The father looked me straight in the eye without anger and said he didn't know what to call me. I replied that he could call me by my name or whatever was most comfortable for him. I told him I was there to add to the situation, not to divide. He remained silent for a long time and then asked about our work, our small house, our neighborhood. I answered calmly, looking him in the eye. In the end, he said he didn't know how to speak beautifully, but that I seemed to care for his son. I said I did, and that Marcelo also cared for me. He nodded without pretense. The whole truth was contained in that gesture. The days of discharge arrived. We took Dad home, arranged the chair next to the window, and left the radio with a new battery. Mom made soup and divided it into labeled containers. Marcelo organized his medicines in a little box marked with the days of the week. I left a short note on the fridge saying, "Call me if you need anything." When we were leaving, Dad called my name, just right, and asked if I could water the plants in the yard sometime. His voice was firm, without favor. I said yes, carefully, so as not to tremble. If you believe care is a verb, comment on caring. The world outside our home, however, doesn't stay quiet. A curious neighbor asked if it was true that Marcelo now lived with me. I said yes, politely and without argument. He looked away and changed the subject. At the market, an acquaintance from church pretended not to see us, but a young man at the checkout whispered strength in a beautiful way. We received sidelong glances and smirks. We learned to choose what to keep and what to let go. If you've ever had to choose what to keep close to your heart, say choice. Laura appeared. In the messages with a practical agenda, she said she needed to sort clothes and papers, that she wanted to do it without arguing. We set a time. We went respectfully. The house was clean. The air smelled of cleaning products and the end of a cycle. The conversation was calm. Laura thanked us for the flowers we once brought her when her father got sick. She said she didn't want war, only peace. The three of us opened a box of photos. There were laughs from old parties and looks that hurt less. Now, we left with 2 small bags and a great sense of relief. I quietly thanked each of us for our courage. If you value non-violent goodbyes, you comment respectfully. The following week, we planned a simple lunch with Mom and Dad. Nothing big, just a set table, fluffy rice, oven-baked chicken, and a bowl of salad. I planned to make a pudding, the kind that trembles beautifully. Dad said he was still weak, but he'd make some. The table looked beautiful because of the courage of ordinary things. When we served his plate, he said thank you again, and this time he looked at Marcelo and me together. The word "we" fit in his eyes. It wasn't a party. It was just the floor. After lunch, Dad called me into the backyard. He handed me a packet of basil seeds and said it was good to plant them near the window because the scent brings peace. He said he'd gotten it from an old friend and wanted to pass it on. I received it like someone receiving a story. I planted it that same day, in a blue pot near the sink. The scent lingered throughout the kitchen. If the smell of home embraces you, it says home. Limits also emerged. A relative sent an audio message with harsh remarks. Marcelo and I listened to it together and decided not to respond in the heat. We took advantage of the late afternoon to walk, breathe, and remember that not every door needs to be opened at once. Afterwards, we wrote a short, firm response, without offense, stating that the path now is one of truth and caution. If you've learned to say no to protect the peace, write your limits in the comments. At the end of the month, I received a message from Marcelo's mother that made me stop on the sidewalk. She said his father wanted to talk to us both on Sunday, without rushing over coffee and cornmeal cake. She said he was learning to speak with less stone and more bread. It hurt and healed at the same time. I closed my eyes and gave thanks for every seed we planted. I told myself it's like this: one step, then another, then another. If this journey touched you, please leave a like now. It helps this story reach those in need. And subscribe so you don't miss the next part. I also want to ask you to leave a comment with the word path. It tells me you've been with me this far and gives me the strength to keep going. On the appointed Sunday, I woke up with my heart pounding. I brought a simple cake, cut the paper edges, and arranged the bow. Marcelo squeezed my hand on the way. When we arrived, the house smelled of fresh coffee and basil. Mom greeted us with a shy hug. Dad waited in the living room, sitting in the armchair by the window. The radio was off. It was also silent. He asked us to sit down. He looked first at Marcelo, then at me. He took a deep breath and spoke bluntly. He said he didn't know how to be a man of words. He said he learned to break things, not fix them. He said his fear turned to stone, and stone doesn't listen. I listened to every word like someone holding a vase to keep it from falling. Then he did something I never imagined. His fingers trembled. He brought his hand to his chest and spoke slowly. I was wrong. I was wrong with my son. I was wrong with you too. I don't know how to apologize. I just know I want to try. Whenever you want, this house is yours. I promised to learn. Marcelo closed his eyes and cried silently. His mother brought a plate of cornmeal cake, set it on the table, and said she was also afraid. She said that silence hurts like screaming. Then she extended her hands to us both. It was a small gesture, but I swear it changed everything. If this apology touched you, share your courage. Your words help this story reach those in need. Dad continued. He said he won't become a different person overnight. He said he still resents his own words, but he wants to start where he can. He asked what we like to cook, how work is going, if our neighborhood is noisy. We talked about the bills, the blue vase in the kitchen, the smell of basil that fills the house. Dad smiled and asked for a picture of the vase to put in the frame next to the radio. Mom wrote my full name on a piece of paper and said she wanted to learn my pudding recipe. If simple bonds move you, write bond in the comments. We stood there for a long time, unhurriedly. At one point, Dad slowly got up, opened the window, and let the light in. He said that light is frightening at first, but then it warms the skin. No one responded. There was no need. The whole room responded with a new air. Before he left, he held my hand firmly. Not too tightly, just right. And he said my name correctly. I said thank you, also just right. The following days were short, but still short. I picked up warm bread on a cold morning. Dad called me to tighten a screw on the chair as if inviting me to a simple and sacred task. Mom texted asking for the grocery list. Marcelo laughed at silly things in the kitchen, and the sound of that laughter rang through the walls. Not everything turned out perfectly. A relative remained stubborn. A neighbor frowned. A woman from church looked away. But it was as if none of it had the same strength as before. The new house within the old house was already standing. If you believe that patience builds bridges, comment bridge. Over time, we opened the gate to more people. We welcomed a couple of friends. Then a young man who hadn't spoken to his father in months. Then a neighbor who brought cake and a listening ear. There, no one needed to justify their lives. Everyone arrived with their own story and left feeling a little lighter. Mom invented a name for these afternoons. She called it a bread and coffee circle. Dad preferred to call it a meeting. I like to call it a home. If you've ever needed a circle like this, write circle in the comments. There was also the day of the first photo of the four of them together. No posing, just a late afternoon with soft light. Dad on the couch, Mom next to him, Marcelo leaning against my shoulder. Mom smiled a little and said the photo was crooked, but that's life. We laughed. I put the photo on the fridge, near the paid bills. Every time I open the door, I remember that truth isn't a scream. Truth is a half-open door through which the wind blows. Sometimes people ask me if we forgive everything. I answer that it's not about forgetting, it's about planting. The pain remains, but alongside it, new things have sprouted. A kind word, an invitation for Sunday, an extra dish on the table, a radio with a game on, a pot of basil that perfumes the entire kitchen. Life didn't become a perfect story. It became a possible path, and that's already a lot. Today, when I walk with Marcelo through the square, I see that our steps have become firmer. Not because the world has become easier. The world is still full of hard corners. But now we know where to return when the day weighs on us. We return home. Home with the smell of coffee. Home with a hammock on the porch. Home with people learning to say, I messed up and I see you. And that changes everything. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like now. It shows the algorithm that this content matters and helps reach those still walking in the dark. And tell me just one word in the comments, the word that stays in your heart after hearing everything. It could be courage, bridge, home, forgiveness. I read each one and respond with love. I also want to ask you to subscribe to the channel now. That way, you won't miss the next stories I'll bring, always told with truth, respect, and hope. Here, each video is a hug for those who need to recognize themselves and take a deep breath. If you know someone living in hiding, send them this video. Sometimes a link is the missing hand, and if you want to leave a special mark, write the phrase "I choose the truth" in the comments. This phrase lifts up those who are weary and reminds them that no one needs to live as a shadow. I end by looking at you, the way I looked at Marcelo's father that Sunday, without a stone in my hand, just with the light shining brightly. Thank you for walking beside me this far. Today's story ends, but the care continues. The next video is coming soon. Click and come with me. We'll walk together, with calm steps, a lively heart, and a burning truth.